Okay, this is your homework for section 1.2. I'm going to go ahead and do some selected answers. Number 2, remember that the reason why we are using set and builder notation is because we're trying to express the numbers that are in the domain and also in the range for the following functions. So remember, there's too many numbers for us to list, so we have to use inequality and we have to use interval. So for number 2, remember that we're trying to find the domain. So we are going to look at the x values and we're looking at starting at 2. And you notice that it continues. Remember that it will continue to positive infinity. So I purposely chose one of the harder ones, so I'm going to go ahead and start with the interval notation. And remember that this is your domain for this function. And we know that for this domain, we're going to start at 2. And we're going to continue going until infinity. And so we don't know exactly what infinity is, so we're going to use a parentheses. And then we know that 2 is included in the domain. So you're going to have a bracket, and you're going to have a comma. Remember, what is a comma going to represent? Yes, it's going to represent all the numbers that are between 2 and infinity, including 2. So remember, I told you to do this type of exercise. You need to describe the domain that's written in interval notation. We're trying to describe the numbers that we're dealing with. We're dealing with numbers that are greater than or equal to 2, for example, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then we keep on going. So we're going to go ahead and use the variable x to represent all those numbers. And we know that we want it to be greater than or equal to the value 2. Now for the range, we're dealing with the set of y values for this function. So we notice we're going to look at the graph. We notice that it does go up 3 units, and we know that it starts here at y equals 3. And we notice that it keeps on increasing, and the question is, will it ever stop? That's the question. So the answer to that is it will never stop, since we have an arrow in our problem for number 2. So we know that it's going to approach positive infinity. And we know that this is going to be your range. So that is your range. So we're going to use interval notation again, since that's the easiest to express the range. So we're going to start, what is the lowest y value? In this case, it's exactly 3. And then once again, what's the highest y value? Infinity. You're going to use comma to describe all the y values that are between 3 and infinity. And on infinity, you're going to have a parentheses, since we don't know what the exact value of infinity is, and then we're going to use a bracket. Once again, we use this exercise that we start describing what are the values in the range. We know that it's going to be 3, 4, 5, 6, anything that's between 3 and infinity. So we're going to say y has to be greater than or equal to 3. We don't have a constant, and we don't have it decreasing. And we're going to talk about increase. I do want to make a correction on the lesson that I gave you guys. I do want to let you know that, yes, we start increasing at 2, and yes, we're going to infinity, and yes, we have a comma and parentheses. I know that some of you were saying, well, it's going to be bracket because it's included. Just want to let you know that we're just strictly worried about where is it increasing, and we notice that it's increasing after x equal 2. So we don't exactly include 2. So we're gonna have a parentheses. Okay, so it's okay if you use bracket. I'm gonna let it go, but technically speaking, parentheses indicates that after 2, it's gonna start to increase. Now, if you put a bracket, I'm not gonna mark it wrong because I did give you the false impression that you could use a bracket, but in this case, we're only worried about where does it start increasing. And of course, we're going from left to right. So it says use a graph to answer the following questions. And you notice that you have an arrow at the end of this function. So it says here to identify the domain and range. So I'm going to work with you in identifying that. So now we are talking about domain and range. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and use a highlighting the way I showed you the highlight. We're going to look at the lowest x value in this function, and we notice that it starts at -7. And of course, if I were to trace this, then I'm going to continue going, and you notice that the arrow indicates that it's going to continue going forever. Remember, what value or what symbol do we use to describe that the numbers are going on forever, or it's going to reach a point way down on the number line? We know that it's approaching infinity. So in this case, we're going to use interval notation because you guys are really good with interval notation when it's this type of situation. Interval notation. Oh, I apologize. That is not range. I meant to write domain. So we're going to go from, and I'm going to say the lowest x value is -7. So think about what would be the highest x value, and that's correct. It's approaching infinity. Once again, what's missing? The comma. And you need to ask yourself, what does a comma represent? That's right. The comma represents all the values that are in blue between -7 and infinity. Remember, there's many numbers that are there. So we're going to use a bracket. Now, we do use a bracket here because we're including that point. And since we can't define infinity, we're going to use a parentheses. Now, to use set builder, the inequality, we know you have to do this exercise. What does it actually mean? It means that any value that is greater than or equal to -7. Okay? Now we're going to go ahead and find the range. And you notice that this goes on forever. So it's kind of hard to see the range because you assume that it starts here, but actually it starts way down here and it goes all the way up to the highest y value that is right there. So what does that mean, and why is that so? Because of this arrow. This arrow indicates that it's going to continue going down and it's never going to stop. So the y value is actually -infinity. And that's the lowest y value, and the highest y value is 3. So let's take a minute to think about what is the range. So the range is all the numbers that are between, remember you always start with the lowest, -infinity and 3. So what do you write? You write the lowest value, which is -infinity. Remember, these are y values, comma, and you're going all the way up to 3. We do include 3 because it is included, and then we have parentheses, right? Because we can define what -infinity is. So what is the range? Let's think about it. It's kind of awkward the way it looks. But yes, the lowest y value is -infinity. That is the lowest y value, -infinity. So it's all the numbers that are between negative infinity and 3. For example, we have 3, 2, 1, 0, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, and then so on. We have decimals, fractions. So we're not able to list all those numbers. So we have to use inequality. We have to use interval. So remember, the y is just like it's going to represent. It's like it's going to represent those values, and we're going to say less than or equal to 3. Now, number 7, we do have a constant. This is where the constant is. Remember, the constant is like the flat line. And we want to know where does it start to be a constant? Where does it start to be a constant, which is at over what x values? It's 0, comma, and then it's going to be 5, right? So it goes from 0 to 5. And remember, we want to know when it starts being a constant, so we're going to have parentheses. I know I'm going to have some people text me on Remind as to how do I explain. I will further explain this in class next week. Decreasing, where does it start decreasing? Well, it starts decreasing, and I'm going to highlight it. It starts decreasing here, doesn't it? The y values are decreasing. So to find the interval over what x values is it decreasing, I have to start with the lowest. In this case, it's 5. That's when it starts decreasing. Parentheses, because that's where it starts decreasing, comma. It will continue to decrease, so I'm going to use infinity because it continues to go in the x direction. Now, I need to know, where does it start to increase, or where is it increasing? It's increasing over here. Here is the y values that are increasing. And then we need to know over what x values is it increasing. It's going to start increasing at -7. And it's going to stop increasing at 0. And once again, we use parentheses. We use parentheses to describe over what x values is it increasing. I will definitely try to do number 8 with you here. The other one, I'm going to let you struggle with it and then turn it in. You could probably work with somebody. The other problems. So A, we have f of -3. So we're going to go to the x value -3. So it's -2, -3. So we know the y value is 0. So if you wanted to make an ordered pair, it'd be -3, 0. F at -5, which is the input. Input is -5. That's -6, -5. You're going to go down 2. So the output is -2. So what is the ordered pair? -5, -2. -10. F at -10 is out of reach. It's not on the function. So guess what it is? That's correct. It's undefined. You're unable to define it. And then, of course, 2, when it's f of 2, it's going to be 3. And the ordered pair is 2, 3. Okay, so I did some selected answers on the homework. If you guys have any questions or any comments, please send them to me through Remind. Have yourself a good weekend. I will send it to everybody that was taught this last class day. Thank you.